The galaxy had long forgotten the days when humanity ruled the stars. Over millennia, their once glorious civilization had faded into myth, replaced by the powerful and technologically advanced species that now dominated the galaxy. To the Zorvans, Arcan, and every other race that had risen in the vacuum left by humanity's fall, the stories of the ancient human fleets were nothing more than ancient fables, tales told by the few remaining human survivors scattered across distant worlds. The Zorvans, a cold and calculating species known for their mastery of biological engineering, had long scoffed at the idea of humanity as anything more than a nuisance in their past. Their empire spanned vast sections of the galaxy, their armies and fleets unmatched in strength. The idea that a long-forgotten species, a mere handful of survivors, could rise to challenge their power seemed laughable. "Legends are for the weak," said Zorvan General Turath, his metallic voice cutting through the chamber. "We've crushed civilizations far older than humanity's. If any human craft still exists, it's nothing more than a derelict relic. If they ever even had warships, they were weak. We are beyond their reach." The Arcan, a race known for their mastery of quantum manipulation and energy weaponry, shared similar views. They had taken the galaxy by storm in the last few centuries, rapidly eclipsing humanity's once prominent position. The Arcan were sleek, fast, and incredibly efficient in battle. Their ships glided like specters through space, their weapons leaving nothing but dust in their wake. To them, the very notion that humanity could ever threaten them was absurd. Yet, despite their confidence, there was a stirring within certain circles, a quiet undercurrent of unease. Some of the older, more cautious leaders spoke of humanity's potential, not as a current threat, but as a dormant one. They were the last race to face the devastating force of the Terran fleets in the great galactic wars long ago, and even then, there had been rumors of ships with weapons so advanced that they tore through entire armadas in mere minutes. But those were just stories, right? "Do you believe in ghosts, Commander?" asked Arcan Admiral Saren, his expression unreadable as he scanned the reports on his terminal. "I believe in power," came the cold reply. "And we have it." The laughter that followed was the same as it had always been, dismissive, full of certainty. They had little reason to fear anything, much less a species whose time had passed centuries ago. On the edges of known space, in the darkest corners of forgotten archives, the legends still lived on. Among the scattered remnants of humanity's scattered survivors, whispers of their ancestors might echoed. A handful of old ships, relics from a time long past, had survived the galactic purge, hidden deep in the recesses of forgotten planets or buried in the fabric of space itself. Yet for most, it was impossible to imagine that anything could remain of that ancient power. But legends have a way of surviving, no matter how many times they are ignored or mocked. Deep within the void, an ancient ship sat dormant, its hull encased in layers of dust and silence. Somewhere, far beyond the reach of the alien empires, the last of humanity's true warriors waited. They had not been forgotten. They had simply been waiting for the galaxy to forget them. The time for humanity's return was approaching, and when it came, it would shatter everything the galaxy thought it knew about power. The war zone had become a death trap, a swirling chaos of fire and metal. The Zorvans and the Arcan had been battling for months, their forces locked in a conflict that seemed endless. The stars above burned with the light of warships that would never return home, their debris drifting like forgotten remnants of a dying age. On the front lines, the alien forces believed they were invincible. They controlled vast stretches of space, their armies a reflection of their power. Yet, amidst the destruction, something new was on the horizon. Something they couldn't see, something they wouldn't understand until it was too late. A single ship, alone in the darkness, slipped into the heart of the battle unnoticed. The human ship, long thought lost to time, had been dormant for centuries, its systems untouched, waiting in silence. It drifted through the outskirts of the war zone, its sensors still asleep, and its vast weapons dormant, like the beating heart of a titan waiting to awaken. On the bridge of the human vessel, Commander Eli Walker surveyed the tactical readouts. His face was calm, though his eyes betrayed the weight of the mission. Walker was one of the last human survivors, and though his ship's AI, Cassandra, had guided him and the few remaining crew members for years, this mission was unlike any other. The galaxy had forgotten them. The galaxy believed they were extinct. It was time to remind them that humanity was far from finished. "Cassandra, status report," Walker said in a low voice, his hand resting on the arm of the captain's chair. The AI's soft, almost ethereal voice responded with precision. "All systems are nominal. Weapons are at full readiness. We are within optimal range of the battle." Walker glanced at the star maps displayed on the console, watching the movements of the alien fleets. He could see the Zorvans advancing toward the Archon, their ships massive and intimidating, each one brimming with firepower. It seemed impossible that anything could stop them, but there was one thing they hadn't considered. There was one force they didn't know about, and it was the last thing they would ever see. Walker's crew, a handful of hardened soldiers and engineers, moved silently through the ship. Their eyes were steely, their movements deliberate. They had been prepared for this moment their entire lives. It had taken years to reactivate the ship's dormant systems, to restore its weapons, shields, and engines. But now it was all coming to fruition. The ship, an ancient war machine of unimaginable power, was no longer a myth. It was real. And it was ready to make the galaxy understand. The human ship, once thought to be nothing more than a relic, was no ordinary vessel. It was a warship crafted by a civilization that had once ruled the stars, a weapon designed for one purpose: to win at all costs. "Commence Phase 1, Walker ordered. Cassandra's voice filled the bridge, her tone steady but urgent. "Acknowledged. Initiating weapons sequence." With a shudder, the ship's weapons came online. Energy pulses began to charge, the hum of the ship's reactors vibrating through the walls. The human ship, for the first time in centuries, came alive. The quiet darkness of space was shattered as the ship's weapons powered up, ready to unleash devastation. Far below, the alien forces were still locked in their battle, oblivious to the threat approaching them from above. They would soon learn that the legends weren't just stories. They would learn that humanity's power, long thought forgotten, had never been fully erased. It was rising again. The battle raged in the distance, a symphony of violence, as the Zorvans pushed forward, their massive warships cutting through the void. They had the upper hand, their forces massive and well-coordinated, while the Archon, despite their advanced technology, struggled to keep up. The tension in the battlefield was palpable, each side calculating their next move, certain of their eventual victory. Yet neither side noticed the human ship until it was too late. Commander Walker stood at the forward observation window, staring out into the chaos. His pulse quickened as the ship's sensors began to lock onto a Zorvan cruiser. This was the moment they had been preparing for. There would be no hesitation, no second chances. The ship was ready, and so was the crew. Targeting Zorvan cruiser, designation Juroth. Weapons locked. Cassandra, the ship's AI, reported in a calm, measured tone. Walker's breath caught in his chest, his grip tightening on the armrest. He had dreamed of this moment for years, but nothing could truly prepare him for what was about to happen. The ship's weapons were beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. Every move, every shot, was calculated and precise. He didn't have to say another word. Fire. A series of blasts erupted from the human ship's weapon systems, the energy bolts streaking across the void with devastating speed. The Zorvan cruiser didn't even have time to react. The first shot hit the cruiser's shields, sending a violent shockwave through the hull. The second shot hit its engines, disabling them entirely. The third and final blast struck its core, and in an instant, the massive vessel exploded, sending debris scattering in all directions. The Zorvans had barely registered what had happened when the human ship fired again. This time, It was another Zorvan vessel, larger, heavily armored, and brimming with firepower. The battle cruiser, the Iktar, a ship feared across the galaxy, moved to engage the human ship, its weapons charging for a devastating counterattack. The crew of the Iktar had no idea what was coming. The human ship didn't flinch. The Zorvan ship fired first, sending a barrage of energy blasts toward the human vessel. The bolts splashed harmlessly off the shields, each one dissipating in a flash of light. The human ship moved with a precision that the Zorvans could not match. It closed the distance between them, its weapons blazing. The Iktar didn't last long. A barrage of energy pulses slammed into its hull, cutting through its armor like a knife through paper. The first hit took out its weapon systems, followed by a devastating strike to its engines. Within moments, the massive cruiser was nothing more than a burning hulk, its remaining crew desperately trying to escape as it crumpled into the void. Walker exhaled slowly, a quiet, grim satisfaction filling him. The ship had proven its power. But this was only the beginning. On the battlefield, the surviving Zorvan and Arkan forces began to realize something was wrong. There was an anomaly in their sensors. Something was tearing through their fleets, leaving them decimated, each strike more precise than the last. Panic began to spread. Ships scattered, unsure of how to respond to the sudden, overwhelming threat. What the hell is happening? A Zorvan commander muttered as his ships fell one by one. He had no answers, only a sinking feeling that he had just encountered a nightmare from an old myth. But the human ship wasn't finished. Walker's voice was steady as he gave the next command. Lock onto another target. This time, let's take out the flagship. Cassandra's voice hummed back, tinged with something akin to approval. Acknowledged, Commander. Targeting Arkan flagship, vigilance. Weapons charging. Another ship would fall, and another legend would become reality. The battlefield was descending into chaos. What had once been a carefully coordinated clash between the Zorvans and Arkan was now a disjointed scramble for survival. Alien ships, once so sure of their superiority, now floundered in disarray. It wasn't just the destruction of their warships that rattled their confidence. It was the sudden, unexplained precision of their opponent. No fleet had ever been able to hit them so decisively, with such accuracy. No one had ever made them fear like this before. As the Zorvans scrambled to regroup, a new signal entered the battlefield. It wasn't another reinforcement from their allies. No, this signal was different, strange, and unfamiliar. It appeared out of nowhere, with no warning, just like the first human ship's strikes had. It was subtle at first, the flashing signal barely noticeable against the noise of the ongoing battle. But when the Zorvans attempted to focus on the new signal, their sensors became erratic, the data scrambling, and the source of the signal slipping in and out of their range. At first, it seemed like a glitch in their systems, an error in their sensors. But then it happened again. A Zorvan destroyer, the Trellis, which had been trying to regroup with the fleet, was struck by a series of powerful energy blasts. The first shot ripped through its shields, the second took out its engines, and the third obliterated its entire forward section. There was no chance to retaliate, no time to call for reinforcements. In mere seconds, the destroyer was nothing but floating debris. The Zorvans quickly attempted to triangulate the source of the attack, but every time they thought they had a fix on the unknown ship, it moved again. No ship had ever been able to move like that, so fast, so unpredictably. And the shots. Every shot was aimed with such precision that it was as though the attacker had seen the future. What in the galaxy is going on? Zorvan Commander Turath demanded, his voice low with growing fear. He looked to his tactical officer, whose face had drained of color as the enemy ships continued to fall. I don't know, sir. There's no signal like this. We've never encountered anything like this before. Move the fleet into defensive formation. Turath ordered, his hands gripping the command console. Concentrate fire on the last known position. We're not going to let this ghost of a ship destroy us. But the unknown ship was already gone. The Zorvan's futile efforts to corner it were quickly proving useless. The enemy ship wasn't just an unpredictable force. It was calculated, deliberate, far more advanced than they had anticipated. In another part of the battlefield, the Archon had noticed the change as well. Their flagship, the Vigilance, commanded by Admiral Saren, was locked in combat with the remnants of the Zorvan fleet. The Archon had the upper hand in the battle, until their sensors began to show the same strange signature. Suddenly, their once confident positions were challenged. Their ships, sleek and deadly, were now being picked off one by one. Admiral Saren turned to his officers, his face taut with frustration. "Activate all shields immediately. We've encountered something new, and it's going to cost us dearly if we don't stop it." But it was too late. The unknown ship emerged from the void, its sleek, ancient hull glinting under the starlight. It didn't give the Archon flagship any time to react. A series of energy beams lashed out, and the Vigilance's shields flared brightly before collapsing under the assault. The first shot took out its primary weapons. The second breached its hull. The third destroyed its engines, and the Archon flagship was lost to the stars. For the first time in centuries, the Archon were facing a force they couldn't predict, couldn't control. They had underestimated the human legend. And now, they were beginning to realize that it was no myth. The battlefield had become a scene of pure chaos. What was supposed to be a war of attrition between the Zorvans and Archon had spiraled into a desperate scramble for survival. Their once feared armadas, built on centuries of dominance, were now fragmented, retreating in disarray. Ships that had once struck fear into the hearts of smaller civilizations were now nothing more than burning husks, floating aimlessly in the blackness of space. The invincible were no longer invincible. Commander Eli Walker stood at the helm of the human vessel, watching the battle unfold from the bridge. The crew, a tight-knit group of seasoned veterans, operated with a level of precision and focus that only years of preparation could have instilled. Walker's eyes never left the tactical readout in front of him, noting every shift in the position of the remaining Zorvan and Archon fleets. They had never expected this, but now they were facing a reality they couldn't deny. "Cassandra," Walker said, his voice calm but carrying an edge of anticipation. "What's the status on the remaining forces?" "Zorvan fleet strength is at 42%. Archon fleet strength is at 38%. Both are in full retreat, though they have begun to regroup. However, their morale is rapidly deteriorating. They no longer have control over the battlefield." Cassandra's voice responded, her synthetic tone a sharp contrast to the chaos outside. Walker nodded, fingers tapping lightly against the console. This wasn't over yet. There was still work to be done. The enemy, now realizing they were not facing just an ancient ship, but an entire battle strategy designed to tear them apart, began to shift tactics. No longer willing to approach the human ship directly, the Zorvans and Archon tried to regroup, hoping that a united force would be able to neutralize the threat. But their attempts were futile. Every time they thought they had cornered the human vessel, it simply disappeared into the void, only to reappear in a new location, one from which it could strike with deadly efficiency. Walker's strategy was simple yet devastating: divide and conquer. While the enemy focused on trying to regroup, they were being picked off one by one. His ship's advanced targeting systems, honed by generations of forgotten technology, allowed him to predict their moves with stunning accuracy. Every strike was deliberate. Every attack designed to cripple, not to kill outright. At least, not yet. A Zorvan dreadnought, the Vernath, loomed large on the far side of the battlefield, still firing at any ship in its vicinity in an attempt to assert its dominance. It was a massive beast, capable of inflicting devastation. But the Vernath was too slow, too unwieldy. As it moved to engage a retreating Archon vessel, Walker saw his chance. His orders were simple: take the Vernath down. Now. In an instant, the human ship moved into position. The energy field surrounding the Vernath flickered as the human vessel unleashed a barrage of high-powered torpedoes, each one carefully calibrated to breach its defenses. The first salvo struck its forward shields, weakening them. The second tore through its weapons array, rendering the massive ship useless. The final blast hit the core, and the Vernath erupted in a brilliant explosion, its remains scattered across the black void. Walker exhaled slowly, watching the confirmation of the kill flash across the screen. But he wasn't satisfied. Not yet. "We're not done. Take out the next group," he ordered. The alien fleets were beginning to fragment further, their retreating vessels now easy targets. The human ship was in its element, the crew working as one well-oiled machine, each strike more precise than the last. The Arkan, once sure of their victory, were now stumbling, their pride shattered, while the Zorvans, ever the pragmatists, began to whisper of retreat. A single human ship had turned the tide of the war, and the galaxy was starting to realize that it wasn't a myth. It was a force that would reshape the future. The battlefield, once a swirling mess of combat, had become an eerie silence, broken only by the occasional flicker of explosions or the distant hum of retreating engines. The once mighty fleets of the Zorvans and Arkan were scattered, their warships reduced to debris or abandoned wrecks, their crew members either dead or fleeing in utter panic. The human ship, now the undisputed ruler of the void, glided through the carnage like a shadow, its weapons silent, awaiting the next move. Commander Eli Walker stood on the bridge, his eyes narrowed as he watched the unfolding scene. The alien fleets, once so proud and powerful, were now on the defensive. The myth of humanity had been realized, and it had brought them to their knees. His fingers drummed against the console as he observed the enemy's movements, now nothing more than desperate attempts to escape. "Cassandra, how many remaining hostile ships?" Walker asked, his voice calm yet tinged with satisfaction. "Zorvans, 15% fleet strength. Arkan, 22% fleet strength. Both are attempting to regroup, but their coordination is severely compromised. Communication is being disrupted." Walker turned his gaze to the star maps in front of him, analyzing the paths of the surviving ships. They were broken, fleeing in every direction. There was no unity left, no strategy. The arrogance and confidence they had displayed at the beginning of the battle were gone. The human ship had shattered their will to fight. "Send a message," Walker said quietly. "Let's remind them of who they're dealing with." Cassandra's voice filled the room, her tone efficient and cold. Message dispatched. A warning, broadcast across every frequency they could intercept, crackled through the silent void. "This is the final warning. Surrender or be destroyed." The arrogance of the Zorvans and Arkan had been replaced with something far more primal. Fear. The alien commanders, who once stood tall and proud, now looked over their shoulders at every corner, questioning their decisions. They were no longer certain of their superiority, no longer sure of their victory. On the bridge of the Arkan flagship, Admiral Saren, who had once led his fleet with ruthless precision, stood frozen. His hands trembled slightly as he watched the communication. The message, the warning. It echoed in his mind, reverberating through the hollow remains of his once unshakable confidence. The human ship, just one vessel, had made them question everything they had believed in. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. A single ship, with nothing but a handful of survivors, had destroyed their best ships, broken their most formidable fleets, and made them feel powerless. In the midst of the confusion and panic, the Zorvans were the first to break. "Retreat. Fall back." Feroth barked from the command center of the Zorvan mothership. The orders echoed through the fleet, but it was too late. The retreat was as disorganized as everything else they had done. There was no coordination left, no plan to salvage the situation. They were running from a ghost, an unstoppable force they didn't understand. But Walker knew they wouldn't retreat forever. They would lick their wounds and try again. However, for now, they had been broken. They had learned what the rest of the galaxy had forgotten. Humanity was not weak, not a myth. but a force to be reckoned with. And with that realization came the crushing understanding. The age of their dominance was over. "Move in," Walker commanded, his tone firm and resolute. "Finish this." The human ship, ever precise, set its sights on the remaining fleets. The war was not over, but it was close. The Zorvans and Arkin had been humbled, broken beyond the point of recovery. The galaxy was about to learn that the true gods of the stars were not the ones they had come to respect. It was humanity. And humanity was just getting started. The silence that followed the broadcasted warning was almost deafening. In the cold vastness of space, the once feared Zorvan and Arkin fleets drifted like broken toys, their power and arrogance stripped away. The few remaining warships were in full retreat, their crews scattered and demoralized. On the bridge of the human vessel, Commander Eli Walker stood motionless, watching as his orders were executed. The battle was nearly won, but there was no joy in his victory, only the grim satisfaction of necessity. "Cassandra," Walker said, his voice still calm, but carrying the weight of the moment. "Begin the final purge. We can't leave any remnants behind." "Understood, Commander," the AI responded, her voice as unwavering as ever. Targeting remaining fleet fragments, weapons charged and ready. Walker's gaze shifted to the viewports. Outside, the remnants of the enemy fleets were scattered like broken glass, unable to pose any further threat. Some ships tried to flee, while others simply drifted, their engines offline, their commanders lost. There was no salvation for them, not after what had been done. The Arkin and Zorvans had learned the hard way that no amount of firepower or arrogance could stand against what humanity had become. The human ship was not just an ancient relic. It was a weapon, a tool of war designed to dismantle the galaxy's most formidable forces with efficiency and cold, precise strikes. The galaxy had forgotten what humanity was capable of, and now it would never forget again. "Commander," one of Walker's officers spoke up, breaking the stillness of the room. "The Zorvans have sent out a distress signal to their homeworld. They're calling for reinforcements." Walker's eyes narrowed. "Let them call for help. Their allies are too far to save them." The Zorvans' plea for help wouldn't reach anyone in time. The fleet was shattered, their command structure broken. The galaxy would soon know what had happened here, and it would be a warning. The human race was no longer on the fringes. They were the apex predator in the stars. "Send the final message to the remaining ships," Walker ordered. "Tell them the reckoning has come. This is the price of underestimating humanity." Cassandra acknowledged the order, sending the message across every known frequency, ensuring that no ship, no commander could deny the truth. "The age of your dominance is over. The reckoning has begun." As Walker watched the message send, he felt the weight of their journey. It had been a long road, one filled with struggles, setbacks, and sacrifice. Humanity had been brought to the edge of extinction, but in the end, they had risen from the ashes. In the distance, the few remaining ships of both alien factions began to disintegrate, each one destroyed in a controlled burst of energy. The ship's weapons were perfect, no unnecessary overkill. Every shot was measured, calculated, precise. Soon, there would be nothing left but the echoes of what had transpired here. A new chapter was being written in the galaxy's history, the story of the human race. Their rise, their resilience, their strength was now undeniable. There would be no more myths. There would be no more legends. Humanity had become the reckoning, and the galaxy would never be the same. The silence in the aftermath of the battle was profound. The remnants of once proud fleets now floated in the cold emptiness of space, their broken forms drifting as a grim testament to the destruction wrought by a single human ship. The galaxy was no longer the same. The age of alien domination had come to a crashing halt, and in its place, a new power had arisen, one that would redefine the future. Commander Eli Walker stood at the bridge, his hands clasped behind his back as he gazed out into the void. The stars shimmered faintly, a stark contrast to the devastation just beyond the hull. It had been a flawless execution, But Walker knew this was only the beginning. Humanity's victory over the Zorvans and Arkin wasn't just a tactical triumph, it was a symbolic one. The human race, long forgotten, had now shown the galaxy its true potential. And no one would ever forget it. Cassandra, Walker spoke, his voice steady. Give me a status update on the remaining enemy forces. Zorvans, complete destruction. Arkin, 92% casualties. The remaining 8% are in retreat toward their homeworlds. Their communication systems are severely compromised, and morale is non-existent. Walker nodded, eyes never leaving the dark expanse outside. The war was over. The aliens would rebuild, but it would take decades, perhaps longer. And by then, humanity would have already claimed its place at the head of the galaxy. Prepare the fleet, Walker ordered, turning away from the viewport. We'll begin making our presence known. It's time for the galaxy to understand who's in charge now. Understood, Commander, Cassandra replied. A series of soft peeps filled the room as the final stages of the ship's operations began. A new era was dawning. Humanity would not wait for permission to lead. It would take what was rightfully theirs. The old powers, the Arkin and the Zorvans, would either submit or perish, and Walker intended to make that clear. As the crew prepared for the next steps, Walker thought back to the legends of humanity. The tales of how mankind had been underestimated by every civilization they had encountered. The aliens had laughed at those stories. They had scoffed at the idea that humans, a young race by galactic standards, could rise to such prominence. They had thought it impossible, a myth and illusion. But now, the legends were real. The ship, built on lost technologies from a forgotten era, was more than a weapon. It was a symbol. It was a message, a promise to the rest of the galaxy that humanity had arrived. They would no longer live in the shadow of others. They would not be dictated to or crushed by the whims of ancient powers. Humanity had learned. Humanity had adapted. And now, humanity was unstoppable. The Zorvans, once the pinnacle of warfaring prowess, were gone. The Arkin, with their prideful arrogance, were broken. The galaxy would now kneel before the might of humankind. Commanders of the galaxy, Walker's voice rang out through the comms, amplified for all to hear. This is a new era, one where humanity will dictate the future. You have two choices: submit and thrive under our rule, or resist and face the full force of our wrath. The message would be broadcasted far and wide, across the entire galaxy, and in every corner, in every race, humanity's declaration would be heard. The age of the aliens had ended. The age of humanity had begun.